Hi, and welcome to Beer with Geeks, where we are fascinated with animation inside the vactor-verse. I'm Tim, and with me, as what seems to be always now, is Frank, Vactor, and Mark. Frank is with me from Beer with Geeks and all thought-provoking audio shows. Vactor is with me, of course, from the vactor-verse, and Mark is with me from Animation Fascination. How are you, gentlemen? Frank, we'll start with you. How are you today?
I'm doing great and glad to be back with this crew.
That's great. Vactor, how are you?
I'm doing excellent. I can't wait to talk animated superheroes.
We're going to talk animated superheroes, which is great because we have Animation Fascination here. Mark, how are you today?
Yeah, doing good. Sorry. I'm ready to celebrate Justice League Warworld.
Yay, Justice League Warworld. Now, of course, this is a three-way crossover between Beer with Geeks, Vactor-verse, and Animation Fascination. But because Beer with Geeks is a show in which we have dogs bark in the middle of our podcast, but it is also a show where Frank and I imbibe some liquor while discussing geeky things. Frank, what are you drinking today?
I have a New Belgium Voodoo Ranger Juicy Haze IPA.
That is a cool can, is what
it
that
is. A cool can, is it not? Like, yeah. So this is a juicy and hazy IPA, and it is delightful. It's got some citrusy flavor to it, and I'm really enjoying it. What about Tim? Are you drinking something tonight?
I am. In honor of one of the segments of Justice League Warworld, I am drinking a High Noon. That was funny because one of the sections was a Western. I'm so clever. I'm drinking a High Noon tequila seltzer strawberry. That's my last one. What are you gonna do?
Nice.
Yeah, these are good. Gentlemen, do you have anything with you from water all the way to root beer? Mark, what do you got?
I am drinking a Kirkland energy shot because I am tired.
Nice.
So that's what I'm
right on. Good for you. Vactor, what about yourself?
Well, all you have to do is fill in with the CGI, the can of A&W right here. I'm enjoying this. It's really good, boys. I forgot my drink, so I have nothing.
That's okay. That's okay. I think you said last time you were gonna have a root beer.
And I should have.
I think it just turns out that Vactor's not a man of his word. I guess that's just what it comes down to.
I have a dilemma on my hands, boys. Maybe you guys can help me solve it. So I have a choice now. A&W is my favorite root beer of all time. The regular A&W, beautiful, bubbly goodness, has a lot of sugar in it. A lot of sugar. So that is option one. Do I want to die by obesity? Or option two, they now have a zero sugar A&W, which contains aspartame, which do I want to die by cancer? So do I want obesity or cancer? Which do I want? Which is the better way to go?
Obesity. I feel like that's like that's almost like a non-question because at least you will enjoy the food that you wanted up until the point where it kills you, but otherwise you're just gonna die from cancer having the not as good version.
Here's the thing: you have some control over, if you have the sugar, you have some control over the intake. You can moderate it, but the aspartame is kind of a question mark of how much of it is gonna hurt you.
That's a very good point. You know what? You've convinced me. I'm going regular A&W from now on. No more zero sugar for me.
You may also get a TLC TV series too if you gain enough weight.
Ooh.
See, there you go.
So, also, I guess I could also exercise as well.
Well, sure, but I mean,
who has the time?
I could grow hair.
Frank's always wanted a ponytail. Little known fact.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Yeah.
Disappointment abounds for Frank.
It does. It truly does.
So anyway, we're here to talk Justice League Warworld. The next entry in the DC animated universe is Tomorrowverse, as it is dubbed, their next entry. And so we'll go around. I'll do a little synopsis of it, non-spoiler. We'll say like whether we liked it, we didn't like it, and then we'll just kind of move into spoilers because this is one that I feel like kind of have to spoil it
Yes.
just to
Yeah.
just to talk about it. So so basically it is the Justice League movie, mostly Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, where they find themselves in different scenarios wondering about themselves, and then they in Warworld and Mongol and stuff. Can't really talk about it besides saying that. So I'll say this movie was really just okay. Like, and that's kind of, it was really just okay. Like, Frank, go ahead.
Yeah, it was fine. Like, it was fine. You know, I one of my things that I try to a benchmark that I try to apply if I feel like I'm not really enjoying a piece of comic book media is to say, like, okay, maybe you're not enjoying this as a movie or a TV episode or whatever, but like, imagine this is a comic. Like, I thought this a lot towards the latter seasons of like Arrow, where I was like, I'm not feeling the show as much anymore. But like, if this is a comic, I'd be super in. Like, I'd still be into it. You know, like it's a good comic book storyline. Maybe it's just not working for me for whatever reason on the screen. With this, I was like, no, I wouldn't enjoy this as a comic either. This is just okay. Like, it's just okay, not bad, but just sort of middle of the road for me.
You know, I was today years old when I found out that these were dubbed the Tomorrowverse. I, for some reason, just thought, hey, this is the continuation of every DC animated universe movie of all time. But now that I go back and think about 2020's Man of Tomorrow, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess there is a through line from that movie all the way through to this one, including the same voice actors. So, you know, I thought, and we have a little text group going. The first thing out of my head when I finished it was, I thought it started slow, but I liked the ending, and that was specifically because the ending sets up something else. So then I started to think about it. Was my positive review only because I was thinking of what was going to come next, and I wasn't actually thinking about this movie? So then I started to question all of my beliefs and my moral system and just my place in reality. But I think I liked it. I didn't love it.
Mark.
Yeah, I think I agree with everyone else's sentiment. It was just okay. It was fine. I gave it the 3 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd for it. The things that I've liked, and with like it being like the Tomorrowverse that I've liked the most with these have been like the voice actors that they've had for these, with like Darren Criss as Clark Kent, Superman, and Jensen Ackles finally getting to be Batman, and Bruce Wayne in there, and then who was
Stana
Katic, yeah.
Stana Katic. Okay, I thought she was very good in there too, but I liked the vignettes, like how they kind of centered on each of them throughout the movie, and I almost kind of wish like how they've done those like that Batman Ninja movie, or they did like New Frontier, like where they've done like these movies that are all of that, or like the Gotham by Gaslight, where it's like all this like Elseworld kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right, as a standalone.
I almost would have liked to seen these 3 stories as their own 3 like standalone movies, and then maybe the Warworld movie itself is then picks up like where they kind of coalesced later in this movie, and then that's its like own thing. But
sure,
that's
all
not,
right. Well,
that's not
I think we've hit into let's spoiler territory. And so just a couple of things to go off of what Mark said, and then my own comment, and that for everybody to discuss. It's a weird way to do Warworld, for those of you who are familiar with it. Like, really isn't Warworld at all. It's 3 Elseworld stories that happen to be connected to Warworld that's barely present in the movie itself. It could be anything. It's like a couple of rooms, and Mongol happens to be there. And then on top of that, if someone told me that the most interesting story that I was going to watch in this involved Batlash, I would have smacked them silly. but here we are. Like, so discuss. Anybody can take that one.
I thought that it was I like what you're saying, Mark, about like if they had expanded each of these stories or given them some more spotlight. I almost, and I know that these are like, obviously they're doing movies by choice, but I almost wish they'd play with the format a little bit and do like, what if they dropped, a 4-episode like miniseries in one day, where there were 30-minute episodes on each of those stories, and then a Warworld episode, and drop it as sort of a little miniseries, almost like a graphic novel or almost like a maxi series or something,
right?
A miniseries. So I would have liked to have seen something like that. I feel like the format of trying to make it one movie kind of made it hard to like. We got, I don't know how far in, and we were still with Jonah Hex and Wonder Woman, which I loved that, but it seemed like they had a lot of story to tell with that, and they were sort of constrained by the format, and then it kind of felt like we rushed through the rest of it a little bit because of that.
Yeah, it was about 20 minutes per segment, and it was a pretty even split. I was kind of...
Was it really? Because it didn't feel that way. That's interesting. Okay.
Some of them were more interesting stories than others. Like I truthfully, like I said, if you told me that the Batlash one with Jonah Hex and Wonder Woman was going to be more interesting than Warlord and Batman, I said that doesn't track for me, like based on my own interests. But I found that one tedious. And then by the time we got to the Twilight Zone-ish episode, apparently it's based on an actual Twilight Zone episode. I can look up the name because my friend told me.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and he said that one's the best one because it actually does, it actually does riff on the episode well.
The Superman one?
The Superman one.
Nice.
Yeah. Hold on.
I can see that being a Twilight Zone plot.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm a big Twilight Zone fan, so that's right up my alley.
It's a take on Will the Real Martian Please Stand Up? Apparently.
Ooh. Okay.
Which is great, but I think part of the issue with the whole thing is that, like, obviously we know who these characters are. So, like, and we know they're going to solve this issue of not knowing who they are. So there really are no stakes at all, like, from start to finish. And I feel like the Wonder Woman one has the most stakes because we don't know the whole situation yet. So why she's there, because we start in media res, right? We're just kind of thrown into it. And because of that, like, anything is possible, but then it's just like, oh, you don't know who you are. I see. Okay. And then you get to Batman and it's the same thing. And that's it.
That's interesting. I actually had the reverse take, and the Batman one was my favorite. And I think it's because that's the one out of all three, that's the one where a character actually goes on a journey from start to finish. Whereas with the Wonder Woman, I feel like she was the same at the start as at the beginning. Superman was kind of the same, except for he found out a little bit more about himself being Superman. But at that point, the veil is lifted and everybody finds out. But I felt like the Batman one, he goes from the prisoner to the savior almost, and I liked that journey of Batman and I think that genre, that kind of fantasy, Conan the Barbarian. I think in one of the special features they call him the Batbarian. To me was the most interesting. So I think I agree with Frank and Mark. If this was let's say if this was like a Justice League show and these were individual episodes leading up to the finale, the season finale, and that's the Warworld piece and what is coming after, what gets set up at the end here. I wonder if that would have been more satisfying, because I think it does shortchange it. And I think, Tim, you were the one who brought that up, of trying to force it into these little boxes. The story is getting kind of short shifted. You're taking pieces out because you have to fit it into this box instead of just letting the story flow. So I think it's very ambitious of what they were trying to do, but it kind of crumbles under the weight of those, trying to do the heavy lifting, I should say.
Mhm. Yeah, I like in theory, like I think Frank said, like if this was a comic, like he said this is one that he wouldn't have enjoyed,
Miniseries.
but like in a miniseries. But I give them credit for there's only a couple of Tomorrowverse movies out there, so like they said, okay, so we can introduce Jonah Hex and Warlord, um, and in those worlds all within the very small time frame to make the DC universe feel so much larger in a really small amount of time. But I think part of that falls apart because it just turns out they're all just imaginary things from the Martian Manhunter.
Mhm.
And then it doesn't really deliver on the promise of its own title, right? It's
Right.
Justice League Warworld, and we don't really spend almost any time in Warworld. Mongol is like he speaks for a bit and then he maybe punches Martian Manhunter. I don't know. I was really checked out by that point. Um, and then like and then Starfire question mark right shows up at the end.
That's Harbinger. They just
Are you
changed the
sure?
look of
Like
her.
they just
Mhm.
changed the look to make her look like
It's in the
Starfire.
special
Okay,
features. Yeah.
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Starbinger.
I didn't know who that. Yeah, I didn't know who that was at first either. But Tim, that's a great point. The title is very deceiving on two fronts. Number one, like you said, the Warworld title is deceiving. I'm going to even say the Justice League part is deceiving because it's really a
Mhm.
Trinity movie, and I'm. This is something that I've been struggling with for decades now. I really wish DC would have the courage to stand behind their roster more than we have to do a Batman story, we have to do a Superman story, or we have to do a Justice League story. For I would say 90% of the DC animated, lineup, even beyond the Tomorrowverse, it's always been Batman, Superman, Justice League. They think those are the only ones that sell, and it
I
just
mean,
kind
the
of
numbers
frustrates
show
me. I
that
think,
those really are the only ones that sell, so you
yeah,
can't really
which
blame them for wanting to sell their product.
that also frustrates me that people don't come out and vote with their
Yeah.
wallets. But as I think all of us are fans of the DC universe in general, and there's so many great characters that they could spotlight, but it almost feels like when I'm making a YouTube video and I have to think about, all right, the title has to make people click on it. It has to bring
Mhm.
the audience in. And that's what it feels like with this. It's like, well, if it put it on the shelf and we say Trinity, it's not going to sell like a Justice League would. So we have to, like, I feel like they feel like they're backed into a corner at this point. They have to put either Superman, Batman, or Justice League. And it's really a deceiving clickbait title because it's not the Justice League. Like
It's
you said,
true.
it's the Trinity and Martian Manhunter.
I
I
think
mean, it's a deceiving title, just like the title of this video, Warworld, worst movie ever, was super deceiving, but here we are. But I mean, no one wants to watch something where it's like, yeah, it was fine. I have felt for a while now that Warner Brothers is a terrible steward of DC Comics, like
Ooh.
terrible, terrible steward, and it should be taken away from them. They're just they are too risk averse an organization, and right now they're in some serious financial trouble where they need to invest in things that are only winners, and they can't take any risks, and they were already super risk averse creatively already. Exactly what you're talking about, Vactor, where they're like, okay, well, everything's either Superman or Batman or Justice League because the numbers show those are the things that do well. Where to the point where they wouldn't take a risk on something that's like a really, really good, Green Lantern story, like Guy Gardner Green Lantern story. Never, not going to happen because it's too risky. Like it could be a really great story. You're not going to see a Guardians of the Galaxy from DC. You're not going to see that
Across the Spider-Verse from DC.
You would
I don't
not.
think.
You would not. And I mean that on the big screen as well as in this arena.
I don't think that's true. I want to flat out say I don't think that's
okay.
True. I think that was true for the past several years. I think what you're saying is correct. Like up until they announced that they were going to do Creature Commandos,
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
that's fair. That's
right.
fair.
And
Like,
I think James Gunn is definitely going to bring in a new
Yes.
a breath of fresh air. I 100% agree with
he's
that.
definitely going to bring in air. I jury's out whether it will be fresh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
You make a good point though. I might have a hangover from the last 15 years or so.
I actually want to get your guys' thoughts on the Tomorrowverse in general. Mark, have you enjoyed the Tomorrowverse? Starting with Man of Tomorrow, it goes Justice Society, World War II, Batman Long Halloween, Green Lantern, Beware My Power, Legion of Superheroes, and then now Justice League Warworld. And then it's already over because there's one more left, which I think we can say at this point, it's leading to Crisis on Infinite Earths. That's going to be the finale of this Tomorrowverse, and then the James Gunn stuff is coming in. So, Mark, what have you thought about the Tomorrowverse so far?
I remember at least when the Superman film came out, I specifically like the animation style for that. I really liked the kind of like thicker. I don't know how other like way to describe it other than I liked the kind of like thicker outlines of like the characters on that.
I call it the Super Friends style.
Yeah,
I think that's what they're like hearkening to.
and I've liked the actors they've had for this go round too, is for representing the different characters too. Like I thought Darren Criss has done a really good job as Clark Kent and Superman in there. Happy that Jensen Ackles finally got to be Batman like he had like always wanted to be. And then that they actually did like another Green Lantern animated film, and
Right.
like what you were
Not
saying
Hal
that with like
Jordan.
and like what you were saying with the Batman like animated films, I looked off screen for a second. I was like, yep, almost like this entire shelf right here is either Batman live action movies or animated movies that take up like
Which I love
the comic.
Batman, but I want
Yeah.
more. I want more flavors.
Yeah, so yeah, like it would be nice if there was more than just like the Flashpoint Paradox movie as being the only animated Flash movie. It would have been cool if there was like a Flash movie within this like Tomorrowverse 2 outside of just being included within like the Justice League or films like that. So I don't know. From that point of view, I've liked kind of like the new animation style and the new kind of point of view for this, but I do wish again like there was more varied stories of rather than just Batman, just Justice League, just Superman all the time.
Right.
I mean, imagine if they dropped a Flash movie, you know, that in coordination with a Flash movie in theaters, right? Like that seems like a great opportunity to marry those things together. But
yeah, it's just I think it shows you the number one, the mismanagement of Warner Brothers, but also that it's just there's nothing. I mean, we can even talk about the live action DC movies. There's no foundation for them to stand on, and so everything feels like it's like they're just throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks, and then they'll build the universe off of that. And then I feel like with this Tomorrowverse, it's kind of like the same thing where it's over before it's even started. Like I'm
Not
it
the fault
started
of the producers or the creators. I feel like obviously above their pay grade.
right. James Gunn coming in, but I guess I like that we're now getting. Hey, it's going to be one creative vision. From what we've been told, if we go off of these reports, it's just going to be one force behind everything, whether it's the live action, the animated, like the whole. There's going to be a cohesive. At least there's going to be a ground level for these things to go off of and have some firm footing, so they're not all shaking and like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. Am I going to have a sequel or what? Like, so I think the premise or the promise, I should say, of this new DC universe is pretty good. Have the geeks enjoyed the Tomorrowverse overall? Let's start with President Gannon because it's his world. So let's ask him first.
Yeah, it's fine. I think most of them are okay. I think the Long Halloween, I guess, combined is probably their best, but I think part 2 is better than part 1 actually. So I actually brought up my I letterbox ranked them. So it goes like the second part of Long Halloween, Justice Society World War II, Long Halloween Part 1, Legion of Superheroes, Green Lantern Beware My Power, Superman Man of Tomorrow, and then Justice League Warworld. So it's like at least it's not like diminishing returns. But I think
all kind of even.
Yeah, I think the cleverest of them is the Justice Society movie. Like it actually surprised me, which doesn't happen a lot inside hero products. So, but like even that one, even though I'd say it's one of their better ones, if not close to their best, like they're still just okay. Like I'll probably never watch them again.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Frank, what about you?
Yeah, I'm with you both. I think that ever since they've been doing these movies since 2006, 7, it's a long time now.
Yeah,
it's the first Superman Doomsday.
Right.
I thought you were talking about like the Tomorrowverse, which was
no, sorry. The question was about the Tomorrowverse, but I'm saying that I think the Tomorrowverse and all of these animated films going back even further are kind of similar level of
2007. Nice job.
Excitement for me.
That up. Yeah.
Very
nice. I feel as though they are all, for the most part, they average like a B plus. With some notable exceptions that are, there's some really great. I thought, New Frontier and the first Wonder Woman one, and a bunch of them were like outstanding. I thought that Long Halloween was fantastic. I think that in general, this whole project, going back to 2007, has been pretty much a BB plus effort, and I think the Tomorrowverse kind of is consistent with everything before it.
Yeah, man. And I also wanted to get your guys' thoughts, because this is always running through my head. I always want to get, when I read something DC, I'm always thinking about this group right here. This is like my closest DC friends are right here. So I also wanted to get your thoughts on DC's hard PG-13 / light R content. And that's actually what threw me off about the Wonder Woman opening was the violence. And it was kind of, I felt gratuitous to the point where it just felt like it was showing violence because we can, and not, this is the story point of, I want to make sure that that the Old West is violent. I felt it just didn't need to be as violent as it was. And I'm not necessarily prudish, and I'm not necessarily somebody who shies away from that type of content, but to me, it felt out of place with Wonder Woman, and I felt like, why is she killing all these people? So I just, that made me think of Harley Quinn, which is hard. Like, it's the language and the violence. I love the Harley Quinn show on Max right now. It's actually one of my favorite shows. But in general, do you think this harder edge DC has been successful, and do you like it? I think is what I want to ask each one of you. But let me ask Frank first.
I think, going back to my Warner Brothers is a terrible steward, I think that they have some data that shows like people want to see this, so this movie will have X number of bloody scenes in it or whatever. I think it is pretty focus groupy and checking a box. So I agree with you that it feels a little gratuitous, and it doesn't really feel like it's necessary in this movie. I think in some of the other ones, it's fit better, but it did sort of feel like, well, we've already decided this is going to be a PG-13. So like, where's the 13? Give me some PG-13.
Right.
So does it work? Sometimes didn't work for me in this one. I'd be just as happy if they didn't do it. In general, I'm like, I want more stuff that I could show to my kid when she's old enough to watch some of this stuff. But then again, this is made for a more adult audience, which I appreciate. So, I could do without it, but there's a place for it. There's a place for it. I just don't know that this movie really did it the way that I would have preferred.
Right. What do you think, Tim?
Uh, to echo both of your points, I think that violence in a story has to serve some form of narrative purpose. Like it's there for a reason to explain something about the characters or the setting or something thematically or something like that. Violence for violence sake really has no place in a story for me. Like I just it's not even it doesn't have to be gratuitous, like, but if it's not doing anything,
Mm-hmm.
then and it's just there, then I don't care to see it. To Frank's point, like it's better to like if you want these characters to survive, if you want them to live for another 85 years, you have to make content that is acceptable for a 4-year-old all the way up to an 80-year-old. And it's like to single out a very particular audience set more often than not is only going to screw your product over in later years because you're not gaining new audience members because you're making these movies like to Frank said like, oh, we've already decided this is going to be PG-13 or R or something like that. And I mean, clearly they were going for an R here,
Mm-hmm.
like there's no question just within the Wonder Woman sequence. But my point, like that it serves zero purpose in the context of the rest of the story, even as it actually gets less violent as the story goes on. So you really wonder why is any of that even there in the first place?
Right.
Because apart from like you said, like, oh, the Wild West is violent. I knew that and I didn't need to see it, nor is it really Justice League Warworld's place to show me that the Wild West is violent. Like, I'll watch Unforgiven if I want to know that, or something like that. Like,
Take one look at Jonah Hex's face, and you know the Wild West was violent.
right, right,
Yeah, it did feel out of place to me, and it felt like it didn't like these are supposed to be anthology stories, and the theme of the war, like they're all tying together because Martian Manhunter has them under a trance, and so leading into the last story, it felt out of place. Like it didn't feel like it meshed with the other two. So yeah, I just had a weird vibe. And I did want to say, Tim, you talked about the history of DC and lasting for 80 years. The DC documentary that is on Max right now, Superpower, the DC story, is
it is
Frank's
great.
Kiss.
You finished
You
it last
gotta
night.
watch it. If you're into the DC, if you're into the history of DC, if you know it or if you don't know it, both audiences, I think, were very well entertained by the three different stories that 3 different episodes, I should say, that are on Max right now. So, got to give a plug to that.
Yeah.
Mark,
Actually, hold on.
oh,
Before
go ahead.
I have one final point before
Yeah.
Mark can say whatever he wants. Sorry, Mark. To go, but the superpowered thing reminded me in that documentary. Jeff Johns says
Ooh,
he says by the way, grim and gritty doesn't mean violent or it doesn't mean realistic. Actually, grim and gritty doesn't mean realistic. He says it should be emotionally real. That's what realistic is. And so in this movie didn't get that memo, right? And so that's that was my kind of my takeaway from that. It just okay. I mean, it feels almost like
Yeah.
a wonder. Like I'm sorry, like if the Harley Quinn show, which is also great, like you said, but that's a for a very particular audience. This movie needs to
Yes,
be
right.
like it's for a general audience, but not like Harley Quinn is a more of a niche watch. But
Yes.
I completely. Oh, but even in the Harley Quinn show, the Bat family is like we have a no kill rule. Like
Right. Yes.
even
Yes.
then the heroes are like, no, we don't kill, and that's an ongoing story point in season 4. Whereas Wonder Woman is just very happy to do a headshot.
Yeah.
Like
I just didn't. Yeah, I just didn't feel like that fit in. And is that the kind of character that I want my son seeing? As like Frank said, if I want my if I want the next generation of actors coming up to watch something on DC, I don't want him learning, hey, it's good to kill. Wonder Woman does it. You should too. Like, I don't want that to be the message necessarily. I did like in the was it in the Batman story where he comes across a gun and he's like he kind of has a muscle
it,
memory and he's like,
it's the a diner one. It's the Superman one.
oh, okay.
Because he's a
Yes.
police
Yeah.
officer or whatever, and he's like,
I
yeah,
did. I did like that. Um,
yeah.
yeah, Mark, what do you
to-
think about the the hard R or hard PG-13.
Yeah, kind of like to return the sentiment of like what everyone else has said. If it like it has to serve some kind of narrative or like thematic purpose to like the overall like story and like the morals that the story is trying to tell, and that. So like what like Snyderverse gets it a lot, but like it was almost like the Snyderverse version of like Wonder Woman, where because the Batman in that would just like shoot people with this the car.
Yeah, he's got machine guns. Like,
Yeah, Superman's breaking necks.
Yeah.
So and then like even like Wonder Woman in those movies like killed people too, like in front of like because when she kicks those people that hard, they're not coming back from that. And like
they went to a farm upstate. It was fine.
So like the like shows like Invincible or like Harley Quinn like that like use violence. It's always used like in a very specific way, or like they're trying to use it to highlight something in that story. So I always appreciate when it's done in that way and not just done for shock value. And
actually,
to go back really quick to
that's an excellent version of using violence thematically or for character use instead of being gratuitous. Like that's a really, really good example.
Right.
And to go back really quick about like the DC animated, like Vactor and I always kind of talk about like that stuff, like for like years with how for like even I guess now still is like for a long time DC animated films, or you could always rely on DC to do really good or at least watchable animated movies, and then Marvel was what you'd go to for the live action films, because for a short period of time Marvel was putting out animated movies. They kind of stopped doing that, and that's still kind of the same sentiment, whereas like you go watch great live action Marvel movies and then you go watch questionable live action DC movies, and it's always been a thing too, where it's like how you guys are saying WB is kind of like a bad steward for DC, which is kind of sad too, where they have the rights to every single DC character, and like Marvel Studios had to like pick and choose what they could use. There's still like some characters that were randomly owned by different studios because of Marvel essentially almost going bankrupt like before the late 90s, so they had to sell all that stuff off. So and they were able to be successful that way with the stuff that they did have, whereas like DC has all their stuff. They can do whatever they want, and they've still somehow, because of that, almost have like the embarrassment of riches, but aren't able to use them properly. So with that, hopefully now James Gunn will be able to do something from that, even like with what he's chosen already for like the like Gods and Monsters kind of chapter 1 of like what they're going to be doing with that stuff. That already seems kind of like a new vision of a path forward to use lesser known characters. They're going to have Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman in there still too, but interweave like Blue Beetle and a few other lesser known characters that maybe have not gotten movies or TV shows or stuff in the past too. So I'm excited for those kind of possibilities of what's to come with that kind of stuff.
And I feel like James Gunn is a comic book fan, and so he understands it from a standpoint that I think previously the Warner Brothers heads have just been businessmen, and it's just been, all right, we got to get the best, we got to get the most money out of this. Who cares if it's what the comic fans want, if it's true to the characters, if it's something that's going to be enjoyable. And I feel like when James Gunn, with him coming in, at least we know that it's somebody who is on our level, and his understanding is, I think, a high level of comic understanding. So I'm happy, at least from that standpoint. Like I said, we don't know what quality of stuff we're going to get, but if we just go off the announcements and the outline of what's coming, I think this is going to be a much better DC situation, and we're going to talk about all that stuff. But Tim, I'm very excited about Crisis on Infinite Earths, and I don't know if I was the only one who, at the end, when that tease happened, like it made me say, "Oh, I love this movie." Like I'm thinking about Crisis, and I wasn't even thinking about anything else about. Oh, I didn't like Wonder Woman shooting people. I was only thinking about that. When you saw that, when that tease hit, did you jump up in joy, or did you go, whatever?
So, I had two reactions. One of them was, "Oh, okay, well,
Starfire.
this was the Starfire." Like, so one of them was, "Oh, this was the announcement at Comic-Con because they announced
Yes,
Crisis
right.
at Comic-Con." So I said, "Okay, well, that I guess that tracks. That leads right in that we know what's coming next." But my second thought was, so this movie was a complete waste of my time. Then, like,
I can see that. Yeah.
and I'm not like a, well, the story doesn't matter anymore because a reboot's coming. I'm not that. If I enjoyed the story, then like I enjoyed the story. Then that's
Right.
great. I don't care if there's a reboot coming. Like whatever. The reboots happen all the time. And so that doesn't affect me. But for me, I was like, but so it's more like from a character point of view, like everything that they just went through. Marshmallow was like, we've been here for months and I've been in your mind. None of it matters now. Not a
Right.
single
Right.
second of their effort matters.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that, I think, not so much for me, but for them, I was like, well, okay, that was fun and short lived. And also, I really didn't feel like the movie needed the tag. I feel like the tag occurred because it was like, this movie's is boring. And maybe someone will be excited for it if we tease Crisis on Infinite Earths at the end. And
They got me.
They got me. It was like a pyramid scheme, and they just got you. They brought you right in. You wrote back to that Nigerian prince, and you sent him your social security number.
Oh man! But Frank, did you have? Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Mine was just gonna be really quick. I was just gonna say I did tell Vactor I did fall asleep last night while I was watching.
Oh yeah.
I
But
had
you
to
said you were tired anyway.
Oh, I mean that's a constant. But I did have to watch the last 20 minutes of the movie again earlier before we started recording.
And was it worth it? Did you miss it?
I was like, oh, Lobo's in this movie. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So
I did like their take on one Lobo. It's a good Lobo, from Man of Tomorrow. But I actually did like their take on Mongol.
Yes, right.
He felt less like I'm big, strong man. Like,
yes.
So I enjoyed that bit.
Yeah, there's a special feature on the movie. I don't know if you're watching this on physical or digital. Anyways, there's a special feature where they talk about the design choice for Mongo, and like you said, they didn't want him to just be a Hulk, Dark Side, Thanos looking guy. It was like we want him to be slim, slender, and almost like he's addicted to the emotions that Warworld is feeding off of, these negative emotions. He's addicted to that, and so he's supposed to be like an addict, and that's why his body is slimmer, and he's just like he's being drained, like he's trying to get from Warworld, but Warworld is taking from him. So yeah, I also like that take on it.
That's a great concept that I did not see in this movie.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, like that. If you spent time doing stuff like that, and exploring that type of thing, then I would have been more invested in this movie instead of 3 useless vignettes.
Right.
Yeah, Mongol was barely a character in this. Like,
right.
Really, like he was sort of a cardboard cutout of Mongol.
Right.
In the way like he was used in the story.
I just the flat Stanley of Mongols, flat Mongol. Is that what?
Yes.
I felt like I was missing like a huge chunk of the story. Once we got into it, I was like, wait a minute, what was going on with the white Martians? And then and the key to this, like it felt like we were coming in, like we fell asleep during the first half of the movie, we're coming into the last half and like, wait a minute, what happened in the first part?
It's like
So-
two in media reses where it's like it starts in media res with like, oh, what's happening with Wonder Woman? It's obviously her, but I wonder what's happening. And then it's like, I wonder what's happening in general.
Right,
What is
right,
happening?
Yes.
I did ask myself what is happening a few
Yes,
times during
right.
this movie. I kind of tuned out towards the end, and then it was over, and I had to rewind and watch the ending again because it just went to credits, and I was like, wait, something happened. That's
Right.
it.
Yeah, I was reading some reviews online where people were saying that they were like, "It's over." Like it's like, what just happened? So I feel like there was a lot of structural problems with this, where the opening it felt kind of weird, the middle felt kind of weird, and then the end felt kind of weird. It was like, you never got your footing on this movie. Like, what is this movie? Because I actually like the mystery of it, of trying to unravel like what is this, and that actually kept me interested going into each one. But then once you got the reveal, it was like, man, I don't know if that was worth the journey that we went on. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
just kind of a
you're almost-
weird structured movie.
You're almost as lost as like Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman are when they come out of like the translator and they're like, I have no idea what's going on. But like, join the club. We are
Yeah.
also
Which
not sure
I
what's
guess,
going on.
Like, is good in some ways narratively,
Yeah.
like keep your
Right,
audience guessing with your main characters. But
Right.
I think part of that issue is that like we know who they are,
Mhm, mhm.
so it's not like it. So the dramatic irony isn't working.
Yeah.
But
Right, right.
that's really what it comes to. And this movie had 3 or 4 writers credited right in the credits, which is usually never a good sign.
Right.
Usually never. Actually, and I want to. Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to pull it up because
Yeah, Jeremy
It looks like the
Adams.
only one. Yeah, Jeremy Adams is the only one that was a return, and he was on Justice Society. Everyone else looks like was new as far as the Tomorrowverse.
Ernie Altbacker and Josie Campbell.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry.
I think,
Josie Campbell also worked on Legion of Superheroes.
I think Ernie Altbacker and Josie Campbell worked together because as the ampersand between their two names, which I know
that's
usually
what I was gonna
means
look.
they're
That's what
a
I was going to
team.
look up. That's the ampersand. They work together. The and the word and they do not. So that tells you a bit when you have multiple credited writers and they didn't all work together.
Yeah.
Then it's credited writers because there's always multiple writers on projects, always.
Right.
But when they're all credited, that means that it was a cluster.
Mhm.
Like that was.
Yeah. This one also had the most out of all of the Tomorrowverse. This one had the most writers.
My only
yeah,
thought that maybe they wrote individual segments, like somebody wrote
yeah,
the Wonder Woman
right.
segment and they got
Right.
credited. Someone wrote the Batman segment and they got credited. But that would explain its narrative floppiness.
Right. Right.
But I don't know.
Could have used another pass.
Yeah. I don't know. Anybody have anything magical or extraordinary or extra they want to say about this movie before we wrap up?
The phrase narrative floppiness is magical to me. I just need to say that.
Slap that on on the front of the Blu-ray, just be like narrative floppiness.
A hype sticker. Now with more narrative floppiness.
It's a personal problem that I that they shouldn't
Narrative
talk about.
floppiness lasts for more than 4 hours.
If narrative floppiness lasts for more than 4 hours, reboot your universe.
Oh man.
Got him.
All right.
Tim,
I guess,
how are the costumes in this movie?
They were all right.
Yeah.
They were like, yeah, honestly, like, and you know what's not good when I was like, they're all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean that for real. Like the design work was okay in the extra things. That's the Batman's barbarian look. He like loses the helmet right away. Like it's all right. Now you're just Conan. Like whatever. People, there are places that everybody can be found in different varieties across the internet. So, Mark, tell the people where they can find you.
You can find me at myself, just my name, at Mark Vibert, on most social media websites, and try to just make it easy. And then Animation Fascination at most places is either at Animation Fascination or at Animated Podcast. whether that's YouTube, Twitter, or I guess maybe it's X now, who cares? Instagram, Facebook, all of the places that you go online to find stuff, that's what it's named. So you can find that stuff there.
Great. Frank, where can the people find you and me?
Folks can find you and me at beerwithgeeks.com. And you can find other shows that feature both Tim and I over on our network, which is thoughtbubbleaudio.com.
Good. And finally, Vactor of the Vactor-verse, where can the people find you?
I have a link tree which has all of my links, linktree.com/vactor. I also wanted to say real quick, both the Vactor-verse and Animation Fascination now have Patreons. So if you are feeling like contributing, I have some links in the show notes. You can go there and contribute. I've tried to jump on this train. Beer with Geeks has been there for years, and now we are here in the Patreon universe. But mostly, I'm on youtube.com/Vactor. That's where I'm putting out most of my content. I did want to say, leading up to the Ahsoka show, not only am I putting out comic book content, but leading up to the Ahsoka show, we're now in August. I'm trying to put out as much Ahsoka content as possible. So youtube.com/Vactor if you want Star Wars and Ahsoka stuff.
Great. Gentlemen, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, even if it's about mediocre products. But the characters themselves are not mediocre, and neither are all of you, and that's what matters. So until next time, cheers.
Cheers.